Paris Jackson has blue eyes, pale skin, and blonde hair. Her father was a black man who grew up in Gary, Indiana, rose to become the biggest pop star on earth, and spent the last years of his life with skin so pale that much of the world forgot what he used to look like. For most of Paris's life, that visual contradiction was something she had to carry publicly, painfully, and often alone. But in the years since Michael Jackson's death, something shifted. Piece by piece, the people closest to the situation began to speak. And what they said did not just complicate the story. It cracked it wide open. This is what actually happened, and why Paris's own response to it all may be the most important part. Most people remember Michael Jackson as a singular force, untouchable, almost mythological. But in November 1996, he got married. Quietly, in Sydney, Australia, to a woman named Debbie Rowe. She was not a celebrity. She was not a musician. She was a dermatology nurse who worked at a clinic in Beverly Hills, and she had known Michael for years through his longtime dermatologist, Dr. Arnold Klein. The nature of that marriage raised eyebrows from the very beginning. The two had never appeared publicly romantic. There was no courtship story, no red carpet appearances as a couple, no obvious build-up the press could point to. And then suddenly there was a wedding. The explanation that later emerged, partly through Debbie herself, was that Michael desperately wanted to be a father. He had reportedly spoken about it privately for years. He wanted children of his own, a real family away from the stage lights, something private, grounded, and real. Debbie, who genuinely cared about him as a friend, offered to help make that happen. Their son Prince was born in 1997. Paris followed in 1998, born at a private clinic in Beverly Hills and, according to family accounts, named after the city where she was conceived. Michael was listed as the father on the birth certificate, and California law recognized him as the legal parent. By the year 2000, the marriage was over. Debbie signed over full custody to Michael, accepted a financial settlement reportedly worth around $8 million, and stepped back from public life almost entirely. On the surface, it was an unconventional arrangement, but a closed one. Michael had his children. Debbie had moved on. And as far as the world knew, the story was settled. What nobody expected was that within a decade, nearly every person connected to those births would end up saying something that contradicted what others had said. And the domino effect that followed would take nearly 20 years to fully unfold. Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009. He was 50 years old. Paris was 11. The grief was immediate and global. But in certain corners of the media, something else was happening too. Questions that had simmered quietly for years were suddenly being asked out loud, because the man who had always deflected them was no longer there to do so. Within weeks of his death, Debbie Rowe gave an interview to a British tabloid. What she said was shocking in its bluntness. She described her marriage to Michael as a business arrangement. She said they had never shared a bed. She described herself not as a wife, or even as a mother in any conventional sense, but as someone who had been paid to carry children through artificial insemination, using an unspecified donor, not necessarily Michael. She said she expected never to see the children again. She said she had been paid, and then moved on. The press seized on it immediately. Here was the birth mother of Michael Jackson's two eldest children, speaking on record and casting serious doubt over whether Michael was their biological father at all. She did not name a donor. She did not name a clinic. She offered no documentation. But the implication hung there, heavy and unresolved, just as the world was trying to process Michael's death. What made it even more complicated was that Debbie's statements were never entirely consistent. In other interviews and through her legal team, she pushed back against reports claiming she was not the children's biological mother, confirming that she was. She later rebuilt a relationship with Paris in the years that followed, and the two reportedly grew close again around 2015. Debbie Rowe in 2009 was not saying the same things as Debbie Rowe in 2015, and the media had little interest in reconciling those contradictions. It only wanted to amplify them. Then the story got stranger. Michael Jackson's death did not just prompt statements from Debbie Rowe. It also led two other men to step forward and insert themselves into the question of Paris and Prince's paternity in ways that were impossible to ignore. The first was Mark Lester. For people unfamiliar with the name, Lester was a British actor best known for playing the lead role in the 1968 film Oliver. He had also been a close friend of Michael Jackson for decades, close enough that Michael made him Paris's godfather. In the weeks after Michael's death, Lester went to the press with a claim that stunned many people. He said he had donated sperm to Michael Jackson at a London clinic in the 1990s, before Prince was born. He said he believed there was a real possibility that both Prince and Paris were biologically his. He pointed to photographs of Paris next to photos of his own daughter Harriet and said the resemblance was striking. He even offered to take a paternity test. His stated reason for coming forward was that he wanted to maintain contact with the children. He said he was concerned about how they were being raised, particularly that Catherine Jackson, a Jehovah's Witness, might raise them in a faith Michael had not wanted for them. But whatever his motives were, the claim was out there, attached to a real name, a documented friendship with Michael, and a specific story. The second name had already been hovering around the situation before anyone openly said it: Dr. Arnold Klein. Klein had been Michael Jackson's dermatologist for decades. He was also the man who ran the Beverly Hills clinic where Debbie Rowe worked. The proximity alone invited speculation. When ABC News interviewed Klein in 2009 and asked him directly whether he was the biological father of Prince and Paris, his answer was cautious and highly specific. He said that, to the best of his knowledge, he was not the father. He said he did not want to feed speculation. He also acknowledged that he had once donated to a sperm bank. He gave no absolute denial. The wording was so careful that it only invited more questions. Then, in 2015, Klein posted a side-by-side image of himself and Prince Jackson on social media with a single caption, the letter H. The post went viral within hours. Articles exploded across the internet comparing facial features and suggesting a connection. The post was later deleted, but by then screenshots had already spread everywhere. The discussion reignited overnight. Klein died later that same year, taking whatever he knew with him. Mark Lester, meanwhile, eventually softened his position. Not completely, but enough to make the story murkier. In later interviews, he suggested it was probably more likely that one of Michael's doctors had been the donor rather than him. By that point, the truth had become almost impossible to untangle. What remained was a fog of competing claims, partial walkbacks, half-denials, and suggestive silences. And all of this was happening while Paris Jackson was growing up. She was 11 when her father died. She was a teenager when Mark Lester and Arnold Klein's names began circulating in tabloids alongside her own across multiple countries. By the time she was 15, she had already attempted suicide multiple times. She later spoke with painful honesty about her struggles, about addiction at a young age, about being sexually assaulted, and about being sent to a therapeutic school in Utah that she would later describe as abusive. None of that happened in a vacuum. Paris was not only grieving the loss of her father. She was also growing up in a world that kept telling her, through headlines, comment sections, and endless recycled stories, that she might not even be his biological daughter. Her appearance, blue eyes, pale skin, blonde hair, was treated like evidence. Her body became part of the argument. Every public photo was scrutinized. Every interview was dissected for clues. She was a teenager trying to figure out who she was while the world debated whether one of the most fundamental parts of her identity was even real. What made it worse was the timing. Every time Paris seemed to be moving forward, finishing school, entering the entertainment industry, releasing music, another old claim would resurface, another article would go viral, and the whole conversation would drag her back to the same place. It was a cycle that served the media's appetite for controversy far more than it served Paris's ability to live her life. And most of the people fueling those stories were not people who actually knew her, had spoken to her, or had verified information. They were working from photographs, old quotes, and speculation, drawing conclusions that were never really theirs to make. There was also another layer to this that people rarely discussed directly: what it means for a mixed-race young woman to have her racial identity treated as a public debate by strangers. Michael Jackson had raised Paris to understand her heritage, to be proud of her roots, and to see herself as connected to a lineage and a culture that her appearance did not obviously reflect. And yet the world kept telling her that her appearance was the only evidence that mattered, that what her father told her was somehow not enough, that she needed outside validation to claim an identity her own parent had already given her. In 2017, Paris addressed the issue directly in an interview with Rolling Stone. She was 18 years old, and what she said was not vague or diplomatic. It was clear. She said Michael Jackson was her father. Full stop. She said he always had been and always would be. She said people who knew Michael well had told her the resemblance between them was almost frightening. She said she considered herself black because her father had looked her in the eyes throughout her childhood and told her she was black and should be proud of her roots. And she said she had no reason to doubt him. She also pointed out something simple but important. Biracial genetics are not always visually obvious. Appearance is not the same thing as certainty. As an example, she mentioned Wentworth Miller, an actor with a black father and white mother, who many people assumed was entirely white. It was a calm, composed, and quietly devastating answer. And for a while it worked. The conversation cooled. But it did not stay gone. In 2023, Paris Jackson appeared in a supporting role in Amazon's series Swarm. It was a deliberate artistic choice, a dark, provocative show with multiple layers beneath the surface. But one particular line delivered by her character sent the internet spiraling back into the same old debate almost immediately. In a conversation within the show, her character mentioned that her father was half black. The interpretation was instant. Comment sections lit up. Old articles were recirculated. The paternity conversation came roaring back as if her 2017 interview had never happened. This time, Paris did not respond with another major sit-down interview. But by then, she had already built something stronger than any single statement, a body of work, a public identity, and a consistent understanding of who she believed herself to be. She had released music. She had been open about her mental health struggles in ways that connected her with a broader audience. She had spoken publicly about the abuse she endured as a teenager. She had walked runways and appeared in major campaigns, not merely as Michael Jackson's daughter, but as an artist and model in her own right. By September 2024, when she walked the runway at Paris Fashion Week for a major fashion brand, she was not appearing as a footnote to her father's legacy. She was appearing as someone building a life and career of her own. Around that period, unverified DNA-related material also circulated online. Screenshots, alleged leaked reports, and supposed test results claiming to reveal the truth. People close to Paris dismissed them as fabricated. There was no credible source, no verified lab, and no legitimate legal process behind any of it. What existed instead was a wave of low-quality viral content, fake narratives, and increasingly AI-generated material designed to harvest clicks from people who already wanted the story to be true. The irony was hard to miss. The same kind of technology helping fuel fake DNA revelations about Paris was also being used to reduce her, once again, to a visual argument about who she looked like. None of it was about her. It was about the story people wanted to tell using her as the subject. What Paris has consistently pushed back against, not loudly, not angrily, but clearly and repeatedly, is the idea that the answer to who she is exists somewhere outside of herself. In interview after interview, over more than a decade in public life, she has returned to the same position. Michael Jackson raised her, loved her, shaped her, and told her who she was. In her view, that is not a secondary form of fatherhood. It is the only form that has ever truly mattered to her. And she has said, directly and indirectly, that she is not interested in living her life as a mystery for other people to solve. Her position remained the same as it had been in 2017. Michael Jackson was her father. Not necessarily as a biological statement supported by public DNA evidence, but as a declaration of love, parenthood, identity, and lived reality. He was the man who raised her, the man who shaped her, the man she continues to carry forward in the way she lives and speaks and creates. In that sense, the question the media has been asking for so many years, who is Paris Jackson's real father, may never have been the right question at all. The real question, the one Paris herself has been answering ever since she was old enough to speak publicly, is something much simpler. What does it mean to be someone's child? And her answer has never changed. It means being raised by them, being loved by them, carrying their values, their voice, and their example into the world long after they are gone. Michael Jackson told his daughter she was black. He taught her to cook soul food. He covered her face in public, not out of shame, but because he wanted her childhood to belong to her rather than the press. He homeschooled her and her brothers at Neverland. He played piano with them. He talked to them about kindness, whatever the biology ultimately was or was not, and to this day there is no publicly verified DNA evidence that settles the matter either way. That is the story Paris has chosen to tell. And when you step back and look at the full arc of this controversy, something becomes very clear. So much of it was generated by people who had something to gain from it, and so little of it ever came from Paris herself. Debbie Rowe gave contradictory interviews across more than a decade, with statements that shifted depending on the time, the context, and the audience. Mark Lester came forward just weeks after Michael's death, at the exact moment global attention was fixed on the Jackson family, and made claims that guaranteed media coverage, then gradually retreated from those claims without fully retracting them. Dr. Arnold Klein offered a denial worded carefully enough to sound like a suggestion, then posted a cryptic comparison online and deleted it without explanation. Every one of those actions kept the story alive. None of them were initiated by Paris. She inherited a controversy she did not create. From a young age, she was asked to defend the legitimacy of her own family under conditions that would have broken many people: grief, addiction, abuse, relentless public scrutiny, and the cruelty of having her racial identity treated like a debate topic by strangers who never knew her father and never knew her. And through all of it, her answer stayed the same. Not because she had nothing else to say, but because she knew what was true to her, and no amount of tabloid speculation was going to change it. The story of Paris Jackson is often framed as a mystery, a paternity puzzle waiting for some final scientific resolution. But that framing was never Paris's. It was always someone else's. And after everything she has lived through in the telling of it, it is hard to argue that she has not earned the right to tell it on her own terms. Drop a comment below. Do you think biology is what makes someone a real parent, or is it the way they raise you? And do you think the media will ever truly let Paris Jackson answer that question for herself? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And for more fascinating stories like this one, click on the next video on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.